This stool type could be a sign of cancer. This video is not about panicking every time your bathroom routine changes. It is about knowing which stool change deserves real respect, because colorectal cancer can be quiet early on, and the difference between catching it early and late can be enormous. For adults over 55, this matters even more, because risk goes up with age, and many people feel perfectly fine until something finally gets their attention. The one stool pattern I really do not want you brushing off is stool that suggests bleeding. That can mean bright red blood, darker blood, or black tarry stool. Not every case is cancer, far from it. But this is one of those signs where guessing can waste precious time. Think of this video as a practical guide, not a scare tactic. By the end, you will know what stool changes can mimic something harmless, what patterns are more concerning, and exactly what to do next if you notice them.
In every age, the body has found quiet ways to wave a warning flag, a cough, a lump, a shadow on a scan, and sometimes in the most ordinary ritual of daily life, a message appears in the toilet bowl. That is what makes this topic so unsettling. Not because stool changes always mean cancer, but because they are one of the few signals a person can actually observe without a machine, a lab, or a hospital room. The body whispers long before it screams, and wise people learn which whispers deserve an answer.
When most people hear stool type, they think constipation or diarrhea. But for cancer risk, the more important idea is not just texture, it is whether the stool suggests bleeding or blockage. A growth in the colon or rectum can be fragile and bleed. It can also narrow the passageway, which changes how stool comes out. So let us break down the blood-related stool patterns in plain English. Bright red blood can show up on the stool, in the water, or on toilet paper. That often means the bleeding is coming from lower down, closer to the rectum. Darker stool can happen when blood has traveled farther through the digestive tract. And black tarry stool is especially important because it can signal serious gastrointestinal bleeding. That does not automatically mean colon cancer, because there are other causes too, but it absolutely deserves prompt attention. If you want the simple headline, here it is. The stool type you should never casually brush off is stool that may contain blood. Red, dark, or tarry black. That is the category that earns your attention.
There is something almost theatrical about blood-changing costume. At one moment, it appears bright and obvious, like a warning lamp. At another, it darkens, travels, and hides in plain sight. The untrained eye sees only color. The trained mind asks a different question. Why is it there at all? That is the turn in the story where denial becomes dangerous. The problem is not that people do not notice. It is that they explain too quickly.
And that brings us to one of the biggest mistakes people make. They see bright red blood and immediately say, it is probably just hemorrhoids. Could it be hemorrhoids? Absolutely. Hemorrhoids are common. But bright red blood is not something you should diagnose by wishful thinking. Rectal bleeding can come from several causes, and one of them is colorectal cancer. So the safer mindset is this. Hemorrhoids are common, but guessing is risky. Get it checked. Now let us clear up another common confusion. Black stool does not always mean bleeding. Iron supplements can darken stool. Medicines with bismuth can darken stool too. Certain foods can also change color. So if someone notices black stool, two helpful questions are these. Did I recently start iron or bismuth? And does this look truly tarry and unusual, or am I also feeling weak, dizzy, faint, or unwell? If the answer is yes to that second part, the concern rises fast. So the rule is not freak out over color alone. The rule is do not casually dismiss color changes that could represent bleeding.
False reassurance is one of the oldest villains in medicine. It speaks gently. It says, give it a few days. It says, you have had this before. It says, surely it is nothing serious. And sometimes it is right, but that is what makes it so persuasive. The lie does not need to be constant. It only needs to be convincing on the one day action mattered most. Illness loves the comfort of assumption. It grows best in the shadow of maybe later.
Blood is the headline sign, but it is not the only stool-related clue worth knowing. Another one is persistent narrowing of the stool. People describe this as ribbon, like stool or pencil-thin stool. Now, occasional thin stool is not a diagnosis. Sometimes the bowel contracts in a way that temporarily changes the shape. That alone is not reason to assume the worst. What matters is the pattern. If stool suddenly becomes consistently narrow and stays that way, especially if that is new for you, it deserves attention. Why? Because a growth can reduce the opening inside the colon or rectum, and the stool may come out thinner as a result. Along with that, watch for a change in bowel habits that does not resolve. Ongoing constipation, ongoing diarrhea, or that annoying feeling that you still need to go even after you already went. Some people also notice more mucus than usual. None of those signs prove cancer. Plenty of non-cancerous problems can cause them. But if they persist, they belong in the category of do not normalize this, especially if they show up together.
Picture an old tunnel, once wide enough for smooth passage, slowly narrowed by debris and time. The carts still roll through, but differently now, thinner, slower, with resistance. So it can be within the bowel. A change in shape is not merely a cosmetic detail. Sometimes it is geometry telling a story. The body is an architect of symptoms. Narrow the passage, and the evidence changes form long before the structure fully fails.
Here is a nuance that matters a lot for trust and accuracy. Sometimes colorectal cancer bleeds in a way you cannot see at all. The stool may look normal. That is why some people are confused when they learn they have anemia, which means low red blood cells, and only later discover there has been slow blood loss from the digestive tract. So if someone has unexplained fatigue, weakness, low energy, shortness of breath with exertion, or they just feel more drained than usual, that does not diagnose colon cancer, but it can fit into the bigger picture. This is especially important for older adults who may blame tiredness on age, poor sleep, or stress. Sometimes the real issue is slow hidden bleeding. So the bowel can send two kinds of messages. Visible ones like blood you can see, and invisible ones like anemia that shows up through symptoms or blood work. That is one reason screening matters so much. Waiting for dramatic symptoms is not a winning strategy because some cancers stay quiet while slowly stealing blood and time in the background.
The most effective enemies are not always the loudest. Some move like armies, others move like rust. Quietly, gradually. A little weakness here, a little fatigue there, until the ordinary life of a person begins to dim without a single dramatic scene. That is why silent bleeding is such an eerie clue. The body may not show crimson evidence at all. Instead, it whispers through exhaustion, through pallor, through the strange heaviness of a task that used to feel easy.
So what should someone actually do if they notice one of these red flag stool changes? First, decide whether this might be an emergency right now. If there is a large amount of blood, if the stool is black and tarry, and you cannot clearly explain it by medicines or food, or if there is lightheadedness, weakness, faintness, or a racing heart, that is not the time to sit at home searching online for reassurance. That is urgent evaluation territory. Second, if it is not an emergency, do not drift into endless waiting. If rectal bleeding lasts more than a day or two, or even sooner if it worries you, make an appointment. If stool has become persistently narrow, or bowel habits have changed and stayed changed for about 1 to 2 weeks, especially with pain or bleeding, that also deserves evaluation. Third, collect useful information. When did it start? How often is it happening? Is it getting worse? Any new iron or bismuth? Any fatigue, weight loss, constipation, diarrhea, or belly pain? That kind of simple history makes the visit far more efficient and helps your clinician choose the next step faster.
There is a cruel little trap that catches many decent people. Embarrassment, not fear of death, not fear of pain, but fear of discussing bowel habits aloud. Whole weeks have been lost to that silence. Yet disease has never cared for dignity, modesty, or polite company. It moves whether spoken of or not. The wiser path is plain and unglamorous. Name the symptom, make the call. Let medicine do its work before the story becomes harder to rewrite.
Now let us make an important distinction that many viewers mix up. Screening is for people without symptoms. Diagnostic testing is for people with symptoms. That difference matters. If you are actively seeing blood or dealing with a persistent stool change, the goal is not to reassure yourself with some vague idea that you will do a screening test later. The goal is evaluation of the actual problem. On the other hand, if you feel fine, that does not mean you're safe forever, because early colorectal cancer can cause no symptoms at all. That is why screening is recommended beginning in midlife. A simple message I like here is this. Screening is not a scare tactic, it is a control tactic. It gives you a chance to catch trouble early, sometimes before it becomes cancer at all. Different approved options exist. Stool-based tests are one route. Colonoscopy is another. If a stool-based screening test comes back abnormal, that is not the end of the process. Colonoscopy is usually needed to complete the evaluation. The best test is the one you will actually complete and follow through on.
This is one of the rare comforts modern medicine can honestly offer. Some cancers wait in ambush. Colorectal cancer often gives us a window. Before the headline, there may be a polyp. Before the tragedy, there may be a chance to remove it. Before the pain, there may be a routine test. History is full of diseases found too late for lack of tools. Here, the tools exist. The contest is often not invention, but participation.
Since this video is for people over 55, I want to emphasize something encouraging. This is one of the few major cancers where prevention and early detection can make a huge difference. Many colorectal cancers start as polyps, which are growths that can sometimes be found and removed before they turn dangerous. That is a powerful idea. You do not have to wait for your body to send an emergency signal before taking action. Lifestyle also plays a role, even though it is not the whole story. Age matters. Genetics matter, family history matters, but modifiable factors matter too. We know that processed meat and heavy red meat intake are part of the risk conversation, and general healthy habits still count. None of that means you can lifestyle your way out of every risk. It means you should not ignore the things you can control while also respecting the things you cannot. So if you want the practical mindset, it is this. Pay attention to symptoms. Get screened on schedule. Do not let embarrassment delay action. And do not rely on feeling fine as proof that everything is fine.
Let the truth be delivered in 3 steady beats. Most stool changes are not cancer. Blood in the stool and persistent narrowing are on the warning list for a reason. And timing changes the story. That is the entire moral arc of this subject. Not hysteria, not denial, recognition. The wise viewer leaves not frightened, but sharpened, carrying a better question into ordinary life. Not what do I hope this is, but what would be foolish to ignore.
So let me close this out in the clearest possible way. The stool type this title is pointing at is stool that suggests bleeding, especially blood you can see, whether it is bright red, dark, or black and terry. That is the pattern that should never be shrugged off. Add to that a stool shape that becomes persistently narrow, a bowel habit change that does not resolve, or the quiet signs of slow blood loss like fatigue and anemia, and the case for evaluation gets stronger. But remember the balanced truth. These signs are not proof of cancer. Hemorrhoids, medicines, infections, and other digestive problems can also be part of the picture. That is exactly why guessing is such a bad strategy. If there is heavy bleeding, black terry stool with weakness or dizziness, or you feel faint, treat it like urgent territory. If it is not an emergency, but the change persists, get seen. Do not wait for pain. Do not wait for certainty, and do not let embarrassment make the decision for you. The real advantage here is speed. Catch it early, and the story can be very different. Ignore it too long, and you may lose options you never realized you had. That is the point of this video, and that is why this bathroom clue matters so much.